Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service on this Monday, April 10th, 2023. And if you'd like additional weather information, you can always go online. Weather.gov is the National Weather Service's online presence. It brings you to a map of the continental U.S. with Alaska and Hawaii to the lower left. If you click anywhere on this map, it'll pull up a forecast for that local area and provide any additional watches, warnings, or advisories for anywhere in the country. Looking at the lower 48 this Monday afternoon, there are frost advisories for portions of the Carolinas up into southern Virginia. Further west, a red flag warning for high fire danger across the Central Plains due to very warm temperatures, strong winds, and dry conditions. In fact, temperatures now across much of Nebraska are in the 70s. That warm air is going to expand north and eastward across the mid and upper Midwest. In fact, Chicago will be up near 80 degrees on Wednesday afternoon. Further west, we have outlooks for snowmelt flooding in portions of the northern Rockies, northern lakes, and then flood watches out here and through the mountainous areas, especially of central and northern Nevada. Well, in Alaska, it's been cold, especially across the northwest. We've been talking about that now the past several days. 30 below zero this Monday morning at Kivalina and noaa, and McGrath set a record low temperature of 28 below for today's date, April 10th. So that's pretty cold. And to add to it, Anchorage has picked up just over 4 inches of snow since midnight last night. So for the date, we've had just 4.1 inches of snow, kicking up the season snowfall total in Anchorage up to 104.6 inches, now making it the 7th snowiest winter season on record. Snowiest winter in Anchorage has been in 2011, 2012, when there was 134.5 inches of snowfall measured that season, and we may have a little more to go yet here as we go through this week. More snow is going to be pushing into the west coast, into the western interior later tonight and during the day Tuesday and into early Wednesday. And overall, we can expect temperatures to average below normal across much of the state, especially the mainland centered on the southwest quadrant for the next couple of weeks, not just this upcoming weekend through that period, but the following weekend. So much of this month, temperatures are going to average below normal across the state. Dead Horse picking up light snow, some blowing snow up there this afternoon, temperature 6 below. Anvik, clear skies right now, but you're going to see clouds increasing as we go through tonight with some light snow moving in probably prior to daybreak or around that time, and certainly could pick up maybe 3 to as much as 5 inches of snow in the lower Yukon Valley through at least early Wednesday morning. Further to the south and east, Whittier had blizzard conditions on Easter Sunday. Partial clearing now with the temperature at 30 degrees. And over in Juneau, the northern half of the Panhandle enjoying breaks in the clouds and some sunshine, 41 degrees, though it will set up conditions there for the northern Panhandle. Be rather chilly tonight. Still some lingering rain and snow showers in the far southern areas. Now, as far as any advisories or warnings, we do have one wind advisory that has been issued rather early. This is for later tomorrow, Tuesday afternoon through early Wednesday morning. Southeast to south winds of 25 to 35 miles an hour could gust as high as 50 miles an hour through some of the higher ridge lines and through the gaps there along the central eastern Alaska range. Further west, a special weather statement issued for the lower Yukon basin, including the southeast side of Norton Sound all the way to McGrath. This area here along also into the upper Kuskokwim River Basin could pick up some measurable snowfall here as we go through late tonight and early Wednesday morning. Some of the heaviest snow could fall in the upper Kuskokwim River Basin, where as much as 6 to 10 inches of snow could fall through early Wednesday morning. Another quick item of interest, because of the cold temperatures, we've seen the redevelopment of some new sea ice, which is rather unusual for this far along in the season, up in areas of Bristol Bay, essentially from Naknek all the way back here toward Cape Newingham. And so this will be the case here at least for another day or so. But again, as mentioned, rather unusual due to the cold temperatures we've had to have sea ice forming that far south for this late in the season. So looking at the satellite imagery, there's the remnants of the low that brought the blizzard conditions to the eastern Kenai on Easter Sunday and the snow up into the Anchorage Bowl. The system is weakening and moving southeastward. eastward. There's another little impulse near Haida Gwaii, keeping some snow and rain showers going there along the southern panhandle. Further north, cold air still sitting here in place. It'll modify us slightly, not quite as cold as what it was late last week and over the weekend. And then behind me, we have low pressure out here, way out toward western Aleutians. And out ahead of it, arcing ahead of it, is a frontal system that's going to continue to work its way eastward, and that is going to move up into the southwest and west coast as we go through late tonight and Tuesday morning, bringing with it initially some snow, and we expect us to be accumulating snows, especially in areas along the lower and portion of the Yukon River Basin as we go through Tuesday and into early Wednesday. Now here's the current surface map showing that low beginning to head away from the central Gulf, now heading southeastward. We've seen just a few pockets of light snow, but they're definitely diminishing across the eastern interior, and then this lagging trough of low pressure along the Beaufort Sea affecting the Arctic coast. That's why there's been little light snow and blowing snow up there, especially around New Exit and on over toward Dead Horse. And then here comes the frontal system now crossing the central Bering and in through the central Aleutians, pushing eastward as this system works its way eastward very late tonight, early Tuesday morning. It'll start to spread some light snow in along the southwest coast, YK deltas into Bristol Bay, and as we go into Tuesday during the day afternoon, that system, the moisture will spread further inland up through the Kuskokwim River Basin, especially the west side of Alaska Range. Some of that moisture will move into south central areas, though it should not be as significant as a snowmaker as the most recent western Gulf low was. And then by Wednesday, that system continues further east, a weak low located in the northern northeastern portion of the Gulf, keeping some areas of rain and mixed rain snow showers going across the panhandle, with a band of lighter snow along and just north of the Alaska Range. So there could be some additional light accumulations even on up toward, say, Fairbanks and the east central areas along the Alcan border as we go through Wednesday. Temperature-wise, readings getting below freezing even in through the panhandle. Not quite as cold here. West of the Alaska Range, 7 below at McGrath instead of 28 below. And even Anchorage will not be as cold as it was. Temperatures should get back up near or above freezing south central areas on Tuesday afternoon. 40s, even upper 40s there at Craig and Ketchikan. And then for Wednesday morning, lows will improve, getting back up near the freezing mark in the panhandle. Back to the west, not quite as cold as it has been, teens and 20s. And then daytime highs Wednesday should get back up in the upper 30s to near 40 degrees. So at times temperatures are going to moderate, but the average high temperature for south central areas here are up in the lower, even middle 40s. So it's going to stay cool, temperatures below normal. Here's where the cold air has been centered, and it's going to begin to, at least the intensity, diminish a bit and shift eastward a bit, but still areas up through here could see an isolated 30 to below reading yet Tuesday morning, and then daytime highs single digits above and below zero. And readings getting back up, though, into the lower 20s or so as you get up toward Fairbanks. But again, Wednesday morning, still cold temperatures, 20s to near 30 below along the Brooks Range and North Slope areas, even back toward Kotzebue Sound. And then daytime highs again, single digits above or below zero across much of the northwest and northern end of the Seward Peninsula. But at least as you get down south of the Yukon River, teens and 20s. And for the southwest, we anticipate temperatures still chilly, but not as cold as what they were. We're going to have clouds increasing along the southwest coast. And then Tuesday afternoon, temperatures along the Aleutian chain up into the Alaska Peninsula, upper 30s to near 40 degrees. Temperatures trying to get up near freezing there at Dillingham. And then by Wednesday morning, we expect lows to be a little warmer than what they have been. Teens as you go up in through the Kuskokwim River Basin. Still some single digits, a little below zero there on the south side of Norton Sound. And warmer temperatures as that frontal system pushes east, lower 40s at least all the way along the Alaska Peninsula toward Kodiak Island. But here, looking at the extended temperature outlook, April 16th through the 20th, core of below to much below normal temperatures here over the southwest and southern mainland surrounding Cook Inlet westward, and even into 8 to 14-day outlook. That's past next weekend. Below normal temperatures centered on south central along and south of the Alaska Range. Precipitation is expected to average a bit below normal in the west, slightly above normal in the east and southeast, and that'll be the case as we go through April 18th and the 24th. A little below normal in the west and a little above normal in the far southeast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving along into your aviation weather, if you have a flight planned Tuesday or Wednesday, there'll be a couple areas of low pressure, one pushing into the lower Yukon Delta and another secondary low forming in the vicinity of Kodiak Island by the time we get into Tuesday. These features are going to work their way eastward, spreading more moisture precipitation across south central areas. So along and just behind this front, we expect a band of IFR conditions Tuesday morning along the southwest coast, Alaska Peninsula. Also up north of the Arctic coast in the Beaufort Sea out over the ice, we have a band of IFR conditions associated with a trough of low pressure that's been fairly stationary up that way. As the moisture works its way eastward Tuesday afternoon, we expect it on both sides of the Alaska range and then pushing up into the western Gulf along the eastern Kenai and areas around, especially western northern Prince William Sound. And then by Wednesday morning, moisture continues eastward a bit, so we expect IFR conditions along the northern and northeastern Gulf Coast up into the far northern Panhandle, lingering back down along the west arm of the Alaska Range along Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay coastlines, and then also a pocket there of IFR conditions in the northwest, west side of the North Slope. Finally, on Wednesday afternoon, we'll see IFR conditions, especially the intercoastal mountains of the Panhandle, the northern portion of the Panhandle, on over toward the Alcan border, St. Elias, Wrangell Mountains, this area here. But we should see some improvement, at least ceilings and things lifting a bit, so mainly MVFR conditions across areas of the Brooks Range North Slope, Alcan border, and then down along and north of the Alaska Range back in through Bristol Bay and extending all the way out through the Aleutians. So we do expect MVFR conditions at Anatuvik Pass there in the Brooks Range Tuesday. Same thing, Adigan Pass, MVFR. Further southwest, Lake Clark and Merrill starting out VFR early Tuesday morning, quickly giving way to IFR conditions as that moisture moves in associated with that front. Rainy Pass VFR early, giving way to IFR. Windy Pass MVFR becoming IFR as that moisture continues to overspread the Alaska Range, pushing eastward. Isabel Pass MVFR also becoming IFR, especially by afternoon and early evening. Further south and west, Metasta Pass, generally MVFR conditions are expected on Tuesday. Tanita Pass MVFR could become IFR as we see that moisture again arriving from the west. Portage Pass also MVFR becoming IFR as we go through Tuesday afternoon and evening. Further east, Chilkoot and White will see a period there of VFR conditions on Tuesday. And looking at the freezing levels, surface freezing line runs out through the central Bering between St. Matthew and St. Paul, and then down across the central Alaska Peninsula along Kodiak Island, Kenai coastline and Gulf Coast, and then in through the inner channels of the Panhandle. Notice the bump up here of the warmer temperatures aloft associated with the front that's going to be pushing eastward into the southwestern coast and western Gulf eventually, and we see freezing levels as high as 6,000 feet plus along areas of the lower Alaska Peninsula. Greatest threat for icing will be associated with this front, leading edge being snow and then a mix of precipitation transitioning to rain, where air temperatures there aloft and at the surface are warmer above freezing. And then some pockets of isolated icing there above 3,000 feet with some lingering showers around Haida Gwaii and the British Columbia coast. Strongest winds aloft, we have a band of upwards of 140 knot jet streak out of the west, south of the Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula in through the North Pacific. Low circulation up there around the North Slope at 30,000 feet. And as we bring it down to 700 millibars or roughly 9,000 feet, broad belt of winds of 35 to 50 knots here across the southern half of the mainland, and also extending back here from the Alaska Peninsula all the way out toward and south of the Aleutians, winds on the order of 40 to as high as 60 knots once you get especially west there of Adak. And 3,000 feet, a couple of low circulations as that front pushes inland toward the southwest, the initial low weakening there over the Yukon Delta, and then this is the secondary low that'll be taking shape Tuesday afternoon around Kodiak Island. That low is going to work its way slowly northeastward up into the north central Gulf and along the northeastern Gulf Coast by the time we get into Wednesday. This will translate to an area of moderate turbulence, mainly over the southwest, along the southwest coastline, especially surrounding Bristol Bay, and then back out across the Alaska Peninsula and trailing southwestward all the way through the Aleutian chain. Further out you go, surface to 3,000 foot aloft turbulence expected there, especially through the central eastern Aleutians, and then surface to 4,000 feet, even surface to 6,000 feet in areas of the southwest around Kodiak Island.
Welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and joining us once again is our good friend Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska. Thanks again for joining us, Eric. We really appreciate it, as always.
Happy to be here, Dave.
Thanks. And, you know, we're going to ask you some more satellite questions here, but, you know, since you're a regular guest, we're going to give you a riddle this time, kind of a trick start to the show. How do you see a polar bear in a snowstorm?
Sounds like a challenging question because the polar bear is white and the snowstorm's white. How do you do that? Well, in the world of satellite meteorology, you couldn't, because the spatial resolution of this instrument that we're going to talk about today has 375 meters resolution, and even the most well-fed polar bear will not be 375 meters across.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to run into such a creature, would you? In the satellite meteorology world, the equivalent would be, how do you tell the difference between clouds and then an area that has no clouds but's covered by snow, a piece of ocean that has no clouds but has sea ice? All three of these are white. The snow, the clouds, the sea ice, it's all white. So how, using satellite data, can you tell someone where the clouds are and where the clear areas are? This is important for aviators. Mariners want to know, in the ocean there, this white stuff, is that sea ice or is that just a cloud? How do we tell the difference? And it turns out, if you look, say, at a picture of Alaska from the springtime, March or April, and it's high noon, so we're getting a lot of sunshine. If you were riding on a satellite with your human eye, look down, everything's white. And we've got a picture of Alaska from early April, and we're seeing some of the lower elevations in south central Alaska are melting out, getting some brown ground there, but otherwise there's a whole lot of white on the image. What areas are cloudy, but what areas are clear and covered by snow or ice? It turns out that if we leave the visible spectrum behind a little bit. See, a satellite has multiple channels in the electromagnetic spectrum that it can look at. Part of that's visible light, what we see as humans, but there's a lot going on at other wavelengths. If we add in something that's called near infrared, what we couldn't quite see, but we're getting into that infrared territory, there's a magical property that we can exploit.
Secrets to find.
Oh yeah. This is actually powerful and almost magical, that at a slightly longer wavelength, when the sun shines down on Alaska and then it bounces off back to the satellite, at that near infrared wavelength, it turns out that snow and ice will absorb that wavelength, but liquid water, like liquid droplets in a cloud, will reflect it back. And that's not the way it works in visible. You know, visible, it just bounces off of all those targets the same. But at near infrared, snow and ice absorbs it, and the liquid will reflect it back. Liquid cloud droplets will do that. And so an image where everything looks white suddenly becomes colorful. And the way this recipe works is that the clouds look pink, and the snow-covered ground and the ice-covered ocean look blue. Suddenly now, we're able to see the polar bear in the snowstorm. We're able to see where the clouds are and where the snow is and where the ice is. This is a powerful advantage. Consider the case zooming into the Bering Strait area. What if you were asked to brief a pilot who wanted to fly, say, from Kotzebue down to Savoonga or Gamble and had to fly VFR, visual flight rules, so they had to stay out of the clouds? Could you use a satellite image where everything is white to provide that pilot any guidance?
It'd be pretty tricky.
Very tricky. And that's why we have to go to this other recipe where the all-white polar bear in the snowstorm becomes more colorful. And now we can tell the pilot, aha, this is a cloud you want to stay out of, but over here, sure, it looks white in the visible spectrum, but what we're doing, we'll show you, oh, this is just snow-covered ground, but it's clear, so you can fly right through there, visual flight rules. Same thing for a mariner who might want to get down to St. Lawrence Island, say, but it has to avoid the sea ice. This product has applicability there as well.
Wonderful.
It's an amazing new technology, so many new channels. The satellite that makes this imagery actually has 22 different channels that it looks at.
22 secret decoder rings.
22 secret decoder rings.
You know, I liken this to an activity I had in the car when I was growing up. We go on long car rides, and we do all the work in these activity books to, you know, stay calm, cool, and collected for our parents who were trying to get us across the state. But to get the answer, the real answer, you had to apply that red red sheet to see the answer or the secret path or whatever the message was in that activity book to get you onto the next page. And it's also like a photography filter, right? If you're taking a lot of pictures, you can apply different colors to see different parts of that image. I mean, that sounds a lot like what you're talking about.
Oh, you know it. The information is in there all along. We just have to combine the channels in a way to reveal what's in there. And by the way, you're dating yourself, so you didn't have an iPad in the back of the car?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, we have, lastly, for dessert. Okay. There's a great image of this same kind of recipe. We're looking at South Central Alaska the first week of January. In first week of January, the sun, even at noon, is really low on the horizon, barely up. And in this image, the fun thing is the shadow of Denali. We can see the shadow of Denali over a lower pink cloud deck.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Denali at 20,000 feet casts a big shadow. So this is another, just for fun, kind of application here. This is called multispectral satellite imagery, and it's the future. And happily, the future is now.
Oh, that is fascinating. And 22 different secrets that can be revealed from just one satellite tool that's floating overhead. Eric, thanks so much for joining us again. We can't wait to have you back and telling us more secrets of satellite technology that are passing over us every single day, many times a day, over Alaska and helping us all the way in many different parts of our lives. So thanks so much for joining us again.
Oh, happy to be here.
All right. And thank you for staying with us. We'll be back with a little more weather here in just a few minutes. And of course, we'll have more Alaska weather facts anytime online.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back for our marine weather segment of the show. Starting with the sea ice edge, ice is still extensive here throughout the Arctic coast down through the Chukchi Sea. We have had a core of some very cold Arctic air just sitting here over the northwestern portion of the state. This air mass will modify a little bit as it inches eastward, but still some very cold temperatures. Morning lows around 30 below zero here since late last week. Now, farther south along the ice edge, the ice did manage to advance southward a bit. And with the cold temperatures, we've even had some newer ice form in and around Bristol Bay. But at least that's rather unusual for so late in the season. But at some point here later on this week, temperatures are going to modify a bit after a frontal system has pushed inland here Tuesday into Wednesday. So maybe not quite as cold as it has been, but still cold for this time of year. And areas of the inner panhandle channels here, winds will be northwest to north 15 knots, especially from Stevens Passage northward through Lynn Canal, waves 2 to 3 feet. Southeast winds there on a Dixon entrance, 4-foot waves. The outer coast, winds generally west to northwest 15 to 20 knots, a little more mixed once you get up around Yakutat Bay, but waves generally running 6 to 7 feet, maybe as high as 8 feet off of Craig. And then looking as we go through the Gulf here on Wednesday, winds will be southeasterly across the inner channels with 10 to 15 knots with waves of 2 to 3 feet. Look for south winds turning easterly as you go up along the outer panhandle coast to Yakutat with waves generally running 6 or 7 feet. For the northwestern Gulf, low pressure has moved out. We have variable winds off the Kenai at 10 knots, winds out of the southeast 15 knots at Prince William Sound with 3-foot waves. Cook Inlet winds will generally be out of the southeast, 10 knots in the upper end, but 20 to 25 knots at the entrance of Cook Inlet with waves of 4 to 5 feet. On Wednesday, winds will be southeasterly across Prince William Sound with waves running only a couple of feet. Generally west winds off of the Kenai coast at 20 knots with 6-foot waves, and then southwest to west winds as high as 25 knots through lower Cook Inlet with waves running around 4 to 6 feet. And looking at Kodiak Island on Tuesday, we have a frontal system that's going to be working its way upwards into this region. Winds ahead of it southeasterly 15 to 20 knots, and then as we get behind the front, winds turn westerly at around 20 to 25 knots with waves of 3 to 6 feet on the North Pacific side, 5 to 8 feet on the Bering side. And by Wednesday, winds will generally be across much of the region, including Kodiak Island, out of the southwest at around 25 knots. Waves running anywhere from 5 to 8 feet on the North Pacific side, and then 5 to 8 feet as well on the Bering side. For the Aleutians, winds across the eastern Aleutians will be out of the southwest around 20 25 knots, picking up to 30 to near 35 knots west of Kiska. Waves generally on the eastern Aleutians 8 to 10 feet either side, but as we get out west of Adak, we could see some waves upwards around 16 to just over 20 feet with those southwesterly near gale force winds. And then on Wednesday, winds will generally be from the southwest 25 to 30 knots across the eastern and central Aleutians, turning back more toward the northwest once you get west of Adak at 25 to 30 knots, and waves will generally run 10 to say 13, 14 feet on the North Pacific side and 7 to 10 feet on the Bering side. Across the southwest coast up into Norton Sound, winds will be northeasterly out of Norton Sound and along the Yukon Delta at 25 knots. With ice in place. Ahead of the front, winds will be southeast 20 to 25 knots, but behind it shifting to the southwest at 25 knots at St. Paul and St. George, with waves up around 10, 11 feet. And then on Wednesday, we expect winds to continue northeasterly out of Norton Sound and along the outer Yukon lower Delta at 15 to 20 knots, 25 knots there at St. Matthew, turning westerly at St. Paul at 20 knots with waves generally 10 to 12 feet out where there is open water away from the ice edge. And finally, along the Arctic coast, winds will be southwesterly 20 to 25 knots in the far north, going through the Chukchi Sea, south to southwest winds 10 to 15 knots, northeast winds 15 to 20, 25 knots north side of St. Lawrence Island and out of Norton Sound. And then as we go into Wednesday, winds will be southwesterly, Prudhoe Bay eastward to Kaktovik, but Utqiagvik down toward the lower Chukchi Sea, look for north winds turning northwesterly at 15 to 20 knots, and generally northerly winds 15 to 20 knots south of the Bering Strait on the north side of St. Lawrence Island and in and around Norton Sound. And then a quick check, we have that low pressure that'll be moving up into the western Gulf on Tuesday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.